Hey everyone, Eric Watson here, freelance writer, player of games, writer of words, recorder of videos, and tabletop role-playing aficionado. Welcome to the DM Roundtable for December 2020. This is a chance for patrons and I to get together and discuss topics in tabletop RPGs, and by sharing our ideas, thoughts, and experiences, we can all become better DMs or GMs. The DM Roundtable discussions are open to all patrons at every level of patreon.com/Rogue Watson. You don't even have to be an active participant. You can jump in here and lurk to your heart's content, and we are glad to have you. Shoutouts to Platinum patrons Joe, Will, Tiny Dancer, Manuel, Basil, Wizard Princess, Christopher, Dave, By Inspection, and Star Loverly. And gold patrons RPG Papercrafts, Charming Grenade, Pretty Boy Numa, Marco Stade, Vicente, Gilberto, Sean AK, Cert2B, Adam, Dithers, Lounge, Sam, Rosh, Limpy Spuds, Drone, Fatboy619, Scalenia, Nick, and Farty McButterpants. Thank you all very much for your support. This month's topic, as determined by the Patreon poll, is Darkvision. Some races have it, some do not. How do we track the light levels in our campaign and balance who can see what? And how does that affect our party's tactics and capabilities? Joining me for this month's DM Roundtable, we have Brian.
Hello.
Right, there he is. Dave.
Hey.
Corey.
Hi there.
And Tiny.
Hello.
So, Darkvision. Has Darkvision, some of you that have played older editions of D&D hopefully can answer this. Has Darkvision always been a thing in D&D, or is this a recent addition? The fact that some...
I started and mainly just played, version 1, and you didn't have Darkvision, you had Infravision and Ultravision.
Like
an Ultravision
Predator thing where they go...
Yeah. Well, and Infravision was basically like night goggles, right? You see into the infrared, everything was black and white. You still had limited what you could see. And then Ultravision was more like you could see in night like daylight, and we never used that, at least when I played. So when I jumped into 5e and discovered Darkvision, I said, oh, this is different.
Well, Darkvision, which I think a lot of us forget about this, including me, is technically, you can't literally see in the dark as if it were daylight, right? It's you can only see like...
It's supposed to be dim light.
Yeah,
dim light.
Or like a grayscale even, I think, or I don't even know if you
Yeah,
need to start
black
color
and
that
white.
much. Yeah.
Mhm.
I don't know if that makes much of a difference in general, but that's...
Well, it makes a difference in perception checks. You're at disadvantage on perception checks involving sight.
See, I think I always
you're in
forget
low
that.
Yeah,
I forget it too. I can recite the rule, but I always forget it.
Yeah, how often does that... Because shit's always dark in the dungeons. Like, that's the
whole point.
That's the whole point, right? And adventurers have to bring torches, and then it's really hard to like stealth around and do things because you're just carrying around this beacon.
Well, if you remember it as a DM, when it comes to maybe passive perception checks too, I mean, because that's your DC, right? So you can subtract 5 from that if they're, using their dark vision, and the passive perception only involves sight.
I don't like subtracting. I'm not a math person.
That's
what I like about...
Just forget I said all that. Just move on.
That's what I like about 5e is that there's no like motto. There's hardly any, like, I think cover is the only thing I can think of that really uses like actual number modifiers. Otherwise, everything is just like advantage, disadvantage. That was one of the biggest things I love about 5e.
It's nice. Yeah.
And
it definitely simplifies things a lot with that.
Yeah, for sure.
Advantage, disadvantage thing.
Does
it seem... Oh, go ahead.
Well, I want to try to just give it back to Darkvision, but if you were going to that, go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, it seems like some of the races in 5e don't have Darkvision that did in first edition.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and I'm thinking like Halflings had Darkvision or Ultravision or Infravision, as it were.
Infravision.
Ultravision.
Yeah. So some of my older characters are playing characters that don't have it, and they're like, "Hey, where's my vision?"
Yeah, that was like a rude awakening that we made going in without having ever really played D&D. Going into 5th edition, something my players and I discovered 2 things pretty quickly. One, perception was extremely important and one of the most important, and I probably overused it in our first campaign because I was using perception for everything. But it was an extremely important skill to where we were all like, holy shit, use perception so often. And the second thing was dark vision. Like if you happen to be just playing a race that is built in dark vision, that is already a huge advantage when you're exploring a space or when you're scouting or anything, versus somebody that had to rely on a light source. To where I'm not even sure it's balanced properly, the fact that some races just get dark vision on top of all the other things all the other races get.
No, it's true. It's interesting when you have a mixed party, because those without it are suddenly carrying torches and light and lanterns, and that would, in first edition, that would disrupt the whole ability of being able to use your infravision, because there was now light there. So now they had to rely they were just like everybody else. So Bullseye's lanterns were the theme for light sources, so you could cover them.
Oh, you could,
and then your elves and everybody could look down the hallway and see what was going on, and then you'd pop it back open.
Yeah, go ahead, Donnie.
It kind of gets, I don't know, it just kind of gets to be burdensome, and I feel like that's probably going to be one of the points of this discussion. But when you're just trying to manage like what people see and don't see when it comes to dark vision, and obviously you want your players to be able to see, especially if it's on virtual tabletop, or it's just they're obviously not going to set foot in a dungeon where it's like you walk in 10 feet and realize I can't see,
Oh no, you still go. I played 12 floors of Dungeon of the Mad Mage with a human cleric that had no dark vision, and I won't do it again, but I did it.
I wouldn't recommend it.
No.
You got the light spell though, don't you?
Light spell, yeah.
Yeah, it didn't help that much.
I mean, the bad thing is every time, the DM's going to be like, so you're carrying around that giant, like, kill me light source, aren't you? It's, right through the dark dungeon. Everybody's going to notice you're there. It also,
I learned that the hard way, getting sniped by Drow from, 120 feet away in the dark.
I mean, it also automatically makes some player characters the scouts. Like, if you're a scout type character and you don't have dark vision, you're at a huge disadvantage versus even if you're not really a scout type character, but you have dark vision. And it's just, it feels almost too powerful of a thing that you can just start at level 1. I mean, and some people can just see in the dark. And there's also
the trade-off really should be that those with dark vision scouting ahead and trying to find traps on the ground are at disadvantage. I mean, rules is written, right?
That's true. That is something that I absolutely need to do a better job of, because I think I forget that every single time. And I forget it because we're playing on a virtual tabletop, right? And it's hugely different between people that have the dark vision, which means they can literally see the map, versus people that don't have dark vision, which means they cannot see anything unless they tell me, they put on a torch or something, and then I go and edit the token and say, okay, now you can see this. And that makes a huge difference between what characters, how the party is experiencing things, the enjoyment level for those characters, to where it feels irksome almost. And yeah, I totally forget that some characters, they automatically can see, but they should still have that disadvantage because it's still supposed to be, darkened and gray for them, and that should affect all their rolls.
Right.
But it just feels like an extra burden to have to keep track of that and keep track of who's got the dark vision and the fact that they have that disadvantage.
And even when you're looking at, as a GM, you're looking at the screen like in Roll20, and what you see is, you see everything, but like if you're looking through their visions, you really can't tell if it's dark vision that you're looking through or a light source that you're looking through. You almost have to do like a special aura for people carrying light sources, just so you remember that, they're carrying a light source.
Yeah, and then with the way Roll20 works, like if you transition from one map to the next, depending on where if you're copy pasting the token versus if you're dragging it from the thing, that determines whether they keep their light on or not. So it's just, for virtual tabletop specifically, it becomes this extra burden to have to switch lighting constantly, and that's just maybe part of a problem with Roll20. But then with characters that don't have it, you get used to the fact that they can just see all the time, and you forget that it's actually that it's the dark vision that grants that disadvantage.
Yeah. Well, that's where the lighting layer comes in nice, because then you can just start putting obstacles everywhere, even just little lines here and there, and pretty soon they're just looking through a shadow of Forest of Shadows, which is kind of, my players seem to appreciate it for the most part.
Yeah.
That's what sold me on Roll20 was the
dynamic lighting.
Dynamic lighting. Yeah. I wasn't using it before, but after that, it was. Yeah, I love it.
It's fun.
It's cool, but when it comes to Darkvision, well, for one, the dynamic lighting can kind of create lag, especially if you got a big map. But the other thing I found is, like when I had players complaining about the lag, and I just switched to a manual reveal, and that sped up the gameplay quite a bit.
The Fog of War.
With the Darkvision, people are moving their tokens a lot more slowly through the map.
It's constantly to update that.
If you just do the manual reveal, it's like, okay, they see everything that you feel like they should be able to see, and they move their tokens around a lot. It's just, as a DM, it can be painful to watch your players just slowly move through a dungeon,
which is the exact problem we had in our current campaign. That Chris has these huge dungeons, which I think are from Dungeon of the Mad Mage. That when you put them into Roll20 with the dynamic lighting on, it becomes a slog to have to walk around because it's just gigantic rooms, and you're dragging your little ass token, and it just takes forever, and it's laggy, and that is problematic. That's specific to Roll20. Also, I definitely want to keep topic for Darkvision, but that's lighting in Roll20 is a problem because of that for sure.
Right.
Just because it lags. Brian, you've been quiet over there. What about your thoughts on Darkvision?
I'd start with kind of the most recent thing you guys were talking about, the lag in Roll20. I noticed when they first put the new dynamic lighting in, there was a lot of lag if you were using it. But probably over the last 2 or 3 weeks, it has not been an issue for us at all. We use the dynamic lighting. My players are just about to start level 23 of Dungeon of the Mad Mage, so they're coming up to the end of it. And it's actually been pretty great, honestly. I love the new version of Darkvision, and the fact that I can tint what they see that adds on to the black and white concept, or if you have Darkvision as a human, the red spectrum.
Yeah, that's a really nice feature I appreciate from Roll20, because then you can use like a black or a gray if you really want to dim someone's vision down.
I haven't experimented with that yet. That just started to get updated?
Yeah, probably a couple weeks ago.
Okay.
Yeah, it's part of each token's settings. When you go into their dynamic lighting under the new dynamic lighting, there's a tint option when you go to the Darkvision.
Okay. Hopefully will improve it.
I'd say, so for Dungeon of the Mad Mage, so for the last 2 years, I do not enforce the disadvantage rule with Darkvision, solely because Dungeon of the Mad Mage is hard enough. It was one of those things where it's just it is a step too far, having to force disadvantage rolls. At the same time, I almost feel like taking Darkvision away from a race or a class it's not really fair. You're taking away an ability that should be permanent to them and make them different from everybody else. So I do enforce the usage of Darkvision and items. That said, in something like Dungeon of the Mad Mage, I provide pretty early on something like a drift globe, but a drift globe that doesn't just follow you after you're 60 feet away, but actually sticks by your side. That way you're not utilizing your hands and you still have sight. So it's not too cumbersome on the player, but it still does enforce that concept of line of sight.
Has anybody had players that specifically wanted a certain race because of Darkvision?
Oh, yeah.
Certain class for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I've had multiple characters in my campaign take a 1 or 2 level warlock dip to get the Devil's Sight.
The Devil's Sight, baby. It's so good.
And it's even worse now because I think you can take just a 1 level cleric dip in that Twilight Cleric and have 300 feet of perfect vision.
Oh shit!
that you can share with other people.
What?
I've had players kind of get
Stupid
pissy
clerics.
even if somebody else in the party doesn't have dark vision. It's like, oh, it's like you're slowing us
even
down,
here.
man, or you're messing with our stealth, or
Yeah.
that sort of thing.
And that sucks. I think that really sucks. I
I don't think I've ever had a character take a race because of dark vision. I think it's part of like their choice, but for the most part, I think my players tend to stick with like theming over mechanics.
Yeah, I mean, I would hope so, but it still just becomes such a big deal. Again, my experience is mostly in a VTT, so when you're looking at that screen, and just even having to go through the motion of saying, okay, yeah, let me light a torch so I can fucking see what's going on here, versus being able to get on the map and just seeing automatically everything there, like that is a huge difference just psychologically for having that dark vision in place. And yeah, there's a reason I have the devil's sight with my character. And plus, you're seeing that campaign from my point of view, despite Chris's DMing it. So I was like, I definitely don't ever want to be looking at a black screen just because I didn't put up a torch in time. So
Yes, thank you for that, Eric.
I mean, it worked out because that was the character concept I wanted, and that was built in thematically. But I mean, certainly that was part of the idea. Was like, I need to have somebody that can see in the dark, and hopefully see in the dark as well as he can.
Yeah, but you used to get, in first edition, it used to get overridden because there was a spell called Continual Light, and you could cast it on all sorts of things. So people would have 1,000 ball bearings and cast Continual Light on it, and then people always just had light, right? So lack of light sort of became an issue, and because it was a magical light, it didn't impact infravision either. So it was sort of the best of both worlds, and going to 5e, a lot of my older players were like, "Hey, where's the continual light spell?" They were surprised.
Light is a cantrip, but it takes an action, which I think always sucks, because there was several times I remember in Tomb, I think specifically Gillian didn't have dark vision, and maybe somebody else, maybe George until he got the bandana, and a lot of times in like the first round of combat, she had to like just cast light, like just so she could fucking see. And that sucks. Like, at the very least, light should not be a full action to cast. Like, come on.
And I think they've since retconned it that don't Tritons automatically get dark vision now?
I think they did, yeah. Because they're like from the fucking ocean and it's dark down there.
Yeah, that would make sense.
Yeah, I don't think they had it when we originally developed the character.
That's funny.
But I mean, because we always do it like it takes a free action for a torch anyway. Like, you could just light up a torch if you want to, because I'm not really big on the whole, like, stowing and switching out gear and all that crap in terms of the action economy.
Yeah,
it drives me crazy that I mean, I should probably just rule that you can just cast light as a free action. Who cares? Just you can see. I'm not gonna.
Yeah, it's like you snap your fingers and it happens.
Yeah,
shouldn't be complicated.
Exactly. So,
I like to circumvent these issues just by kind of handing out utility magic items like candy. I mean, Goggles of Night, or some, homebrewed earrings that, where they can talk to each other if the party is separated.
Ooh, that's good.
I mean, just these
I like that idea.
Yeah.
all these issues that come up as a DM or just kind of mess with the experience that other players have, because if you have one player with light, it kind of does mess up the party dynamic.
You've got the one sneaky rogue with dark vision. It's like, dude, I don't want to have a fucking light near me. Now I gotta go away.
Exactly. So it does. One person having a light source kind of messes with everybody. So I kind of very quickly get them all onto dark vision. Now that said, I will, if I give somebody Goggles of Night, I mean, they got to attune to it. That's they only have two 2-minute slots left, whereas people who have dark vision still have 3,
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, that's a good idea to try to balance it out like that. Yeah, I just feel bad, especially if you've got like 3 or 4 party members out of the 4 or 5 party, and like the one person doesn't or something, and they're always like, I can't see anything, and everybody else is kind of rushing ahead. They're like, I guess I'll have to cast light now in combat.
At this point, how many races don't have dark vision? I mean, isn't it over 80% of the races in all the books have dark vision?
No, that can't be right.
No, it seems to have gone the other way.
Are you sure?
No, not at all.
I'm not either.
Just my general impression from from.
I just remember Dragonborn human
halfling.
Somebody Google
halfling.
Yeah,
that don't have dark vision.
Goliath.
Yeah,
dark vision. I can't remember.
Yeah, it's halflings, humans, dragonborn, Aarakocra, and Genasi.
Okay.
Oh, and Goliaths don't either.
That's not very many out of the
half
whole.
Elves get dark vision.
Yeah,
half elves get dark vision.
Half elves get dark vision. Yeah,
get all the elf stuff and facial hair. They get the best.
Oh, you never play a full born elf.
That's right.
This is a side tangent, but there needs to be some mechanics for combining any races, like a dwarf and a halfling, or a dwarf and an orc, so you get a dork.
The dork.
It's actually in Ghosts of what is Ghosts of Dragonspear Castle. They have dorks.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, can all the races enter? This could be a whole different topic. Other races that can interbreed and create viable offspring, besides humans, I guess.
Yeah.
What we're talking about? Dark vision.
Dark vision.
I don't. A lot of races have dark vision to the point where it feels like you are the odd person out if you don't have dark vision.
Yeah,
that's how I feel now too. It seems just like it punishes you for playing the human or the halfling or the dragonborn. And I can't believe Dragonborn didn't get dark vision.
I was kind of surprised with that one.
Yeah, that is funny.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know about you guys, but like, as a human player, and the only human player in our Tomb of Annihilation campaign, I played a wizard and thoroughly enjoyed blindly throwing fireballs and saying, hope nobody's in the radius, guys.
That's funny. You could make that like, I'm like, I don't need to see. I'm just gonna fire into the darkness.
I tell you, as the human cleric in Tomb of the Mad Mage, it was pain. It was absolute pain.
Oh,
yeah.
Even with light sources available and things, it's just
I had party members rushing off into the darkness, taking damage, and you're standing in your little bubble of light. Well, if they don't come back to me, I can't heal you. And it was a nightmare.
My brother's character really was killed because of other players needing a light source, because he was playing a what's that ranger called? It's a
Gloomstalker.
Gloomstalker, thank you. He was playing Gloomstalker, and he which are basically invisible to anybody who has dark vision or depends on dark vision, as long as the Gloomstalker is in darkness. So he, my brother was kind of like playing this. He was on meds, so he wasn't really thinking straight. He walked right into another player's light source, and I had a monster in hiding that came down and swallowed him. So, I mean, it messes with the party dynamic.
I didn't realize that had that ability where you had to stay. So if you're that kind of ranger,
it's so ridiculously powerful.
You're invisible if you're in darkness to creature.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah, you are.
That rely on dark vision. Yeah.
Yeah, I had to ban that. I had to outright ban that class for Dungeon of the Mad Mage, just because you're constantly in darkness and every creature has dark vision.
That's that's another topic I want to have is any straight up bans or restrictions we put on our campaigns for whatever reason. That would be a good future topic, I think, for those kind of reasons. Either mechanically,
number one on my list.
Yeah, either mechanically because of things that are just imbalanced in general, or mechanically because of our campaign, or thematically because it's like, no, you can't play a warlock because you're demon hunters, or something like that could be. But that's a separate interesting topic.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, dark vision. I don't know. I have mixed thoughts. Like, it's cool that that a lot of races can see in the dark, but I think it imbalances things quite a bit. And a lot of people want to play human, and it really sucks to be one of the few races that can't see in the dark. I mean, you're already so many races are so exotic in so many other ways. Like, dark vision just feels like for so many races just icing on the cake. I feel like they should have had it be where there was. Well, and I guess now it's there's way more races too, because we've got 5 or 6 years worth of content, but there should have been like 1 or 2 races that were like built around the fact that they can see in the dark and they're good in the dark. Like, and then it would have felt more of an exotic, interesting thing. And they should have kept it where it was like, you were the rare, cool, that's your like one specific cool special thing you can do is see in the dark, and some other stuff too. And everybody else has to be, the usual torch stuff.
I think that's a good idea. Like, people in the Underdark, you have dark vision, but then you also have sunlight sensitivity.
Yeah, exactly. Like, yeah, the drow, Dwerger, like they can all, but they're blinded by the light, wrapped up.
Treat them like kobolds.
What were you saying?
Kobolds have sunlight sensitivity too.
Exactly.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
And that helps balance it out too. Like, if you can see really well in the dark, then you can't see very well in the sunlight. That should make sense.
All right.
Yeah, that would make sense. That would make sense. That if you have the dark vision, then you're at a disadvantage in a bright light area.
But I look at that though, and some campaigns, like Dungeon of the Mad Mage doesn't count for this one, but some campaigns, then now you have to deal with the fact that they're sunlight sensitive, and that if it's 50% of your campaign is outside,
yeah,
now you have to worry about that crap.
Yeah, I mean, you're balancing your character around in any campaign, which that'd be just interesting. I mean, and if you play a drow, I think that's what the case is anyway. Like, you have sunlight sensitivity, or one of those other races. Then you might be 50% of the time have disadvantage on things, and the other 50% you can see in the dark. But the problem is the see in the dark stuff's not that fucking special, because a lot of races can do that.
Yeah, that's true.
I think a lot of players will maybe have a tendency to try to build a character that will fit, story wise, but also mechanically into a campaign like that, and actually take advantage of the fact that I really don't need dark vision so much in this campaign.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, part of it could just be the way you light the campaign. It's like, hey, guess what? This place has got light, so dark vision doesn't count for as much.
Right. Like, this is an urban adventure, or even something like Tomb of Annihilation. If you were going into that campaign, you could be like, until the actual finale, which granted is pretty big, that one mega dungeon, like, it's a lot of it's in the open air or in the jungle or in the daylight.
Right, exactly. So it's not so critical.
Yeah.
Unless you have night fights, which I've been having a lot of fun with that, because it's just interesting to sort of turn off the vision for everybody and run around the dark with things that want to eat them.
I guess that makes magical darkness all the more powerful, because that suddenly puts everybody on a level playing field, and then you suddenly have to actually try to wrap your head around the mechanics behind the fact that everybody's blinded, but also everybody can't see each other, and how does that actually work mechanically? It's the fucking fog cloud problem all over again that I struggled with for years.
Yes.
Like, well, you can't see your target, but your target can't see you, so I guess we're just rolling like normal, and this fog cloud means nothing. I don't know. I think we eventually came up with some house rules for it, but it was never quite satisfying. Might be a 5e problem. All right. I think we might have actually exhausted this topic on dark vision. Does anybody have any other final thoughts?
Well, I was thinking that if you ended up limiting dark vision players, give them a disadvantage during light, then you're going to have a new magic item, which is going to, of course, be goggles of day.
Yeah, it's not something. I don't think it's that imbalancing that I would make that restriction. I mean, it's something that if I were redesigning, the next edition of D&D, that I would look at doing, and I would get all kinds of hate mail for it, but that's something that I would consider. I don't think I would consider actually like nerfing dark vision in my games or anything like that. And plus, as we mentioned, like, honestly, you could easily play a whole campaign and everybody has dark vision because nobody's a human, or dragonborn or something. So
yeah,
not gonna be a thing. I Brian, you mentioned not ever ruling on the disadvantage. I straight up have never remembered that that's even a freaking rule. Tiny mentioned that at the beginning, and I was like, oh right, you're supposed to have disadvantage if you're doing stuff just by seeing it in your dark vision, because it's dim light. Well, dim light in general is supposed to give disadvantage, which I always forget about. versus having that bright light out there. It's just something that, and on VTT, it's kind of, I guess if you're on a table, you can kind of keep track of like, all right, there's dim light, everybody sees in dim, it's all disadvantage. In a VTT, for some reason, I lose that, even though it should be that visual element. I should be able to differentiate better, but I completely forget about that when I'm actually DMing those games.
Yeah, I mean, even fog does it. Anything where you're lightly obscured should be giving that disadvantage.
Well, that I can. If
for me, like every room, at least, like if you go look at my Dungeon of the Mad Mage map from like the DM side, there's green writing on every single room. That's like the basic traits of the room, like wall height, what the light's like, things like that, to try and trigger kind of that memory of, hey, this should be dim lighting, or hey, it's bright light.
If there's an extra environmental hazard that messes with vision, then I can remember it, because to me it's specifically a hazard that is imposing a disadvantage. That I can remember, but I cannot for the life of me remember that somebody just walking around a dungeon with Darkvision on is supposed to just have disadvantage all the time on all their sight stuff. Like, for some reason, that just never triggers. But if it's something specifically that's obscuring vision, or like you said, a fog or something, then that is instantly like, okay, this is what this thing does.
Right.
I mean, when it comes to DMing, though, I think the most important thing with Darkvision is that you set an expectation for your players of what the campaign's like before you start, before they've selected their characters. That way, they've got an idea. So, I mean, when I set up Dungeon of the Mad Mage, I said, look, you're going to constantly be in the dark. I'm going to enforce line of sight, but I'm not going to enforce the disadvantage due to the challenge that the campaign is. As we're rolling into Rime of the Frost Maiden, today, I told my players they could start working on their characters. I told them ahead of time, like, hey, you've kind of been coddled a little bit with Darkvision. That's going to change. That way they can plan their characters. If Darkvision and having to carry a torch affects a player's fun, they can plan for that ahead of time.
Okay.
As long as you're not pushing it on them at the last second. I think that's the most important thing.
Yeah, that's a good idea.
And,
Give everybody.
I think it's important to like operate under a certain set of assumptions. Like, if you don't have Darkvision, you're carrying around a torch so you can see, or a lantern. And when you get into combat, just you drop it on the ground or something like that. That you're. So then you're not constantly like, okay, you have a torch in one hand and a sword in one hand. What do you do with your torch? And then you got to have a special token for that torch and whatnot. Just make the assumption that they drop it on the ground and pick it back up. And
we're not playing Skyrim. I don't want to have to shuffle my actual hands around in a tabletop RPG. I'm not doing that shit. I never worry about that.
One of the pluses of dynamic lighting in Roll20 is those players who don't have Darkvision do have to figure out their lighting. And the players have to talk about it as a group, as how they're going to deal with it, and that creates interesting interactions.
It is interesting when you have like one character is designated the light bearer, and then this happened a couple times in Tomb for sure, and then that person would like run off, and then somebody who didn't have Darkvision was like, oh wait, now I'm in darkness because my light source just ran away.
It was hilarious. It was always Gillian, of course, but
I know, she got
always very entertaining. Did Turtles have Darkvision? Was that a thing, or
I don't think he did.
So you gave him the headband of seeing everything.
He got the blind sight headband, which was pretty late in the camp. Well, generally late. It was towards the end of Omu, I think. But spoilers for Tomb Annihilation campaign.
You kicking yourself for giving that headband to him, Eric?
No, I think it was pretty fun. I mean, I remember there was some crafting series where I was like, oh man, this was a pain in the ass.
Yeah.
There were one or two things that definitely made it more challenging, but he honestly just makes everything so much fun, whatever I give him. So I was pretty pleased that he seemed to still have pretty fun with it. And it did help solve the problem, the vision problem, while also giving him a I think there was a restriction on it where he was like literally blinded beyond 30 feet, so he could like see everything within 30 feet. but then he was blinded beyond there, so it was kind of a give or take on that one.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah, he could. He got this bandana, and it gave him true sight out to 30 feet, which that became a pain in the ass towards the end. Spoilery for Tomb of Annihilation, where he could see like the night hags and shit like that when they were in that room. But outside of 30 feet, he was blinded, and then I made sure to put in the fine print that if you take it off, you're still blinded until your next you can't just take it on and off to like cheat the system basically. So you had to keep it on, and then if you took it off, you had to wait like until your next rest to where your eyes would readjust. Which he never took it off. He was perfectly fine with having that restriction. And honestly, after he got that bandana, we were going into the dungeon, which was good timing because a lot of the long range stuff basically didn't really come into play too often after that.
Right. Interesting.
Yeah. All right. Final thoughts on Darkvision. Let's go with Tiny first.
I would just say, especially if you're on Roll20, start practicing at doing manual reveal if you have super big maps that are laggy, because then you'll find that it actually speeds up your play. People don't take a whole bunch of time just slowly meandering through the dungeon. So that's it for me.
Yeah, that's a good point. Roll20, the dynamic lighting is really fun, but especially on big maps, it can cause some serious performance issues. Corey, final thoughts on Darkvision and lighting?
I think we covered most of it. I find with Roll20 being the DM, if you have too many tokens as a DM on your screen that also have lighting, you get a serious lag spike.
Yeah.
So I do my best to remove the vision from all the monsters and try not to cheat. But that's about all I can add.
Yeah, Roll20 defaults vision for monsters now, and that I guess so you can test the dynamic lighting when you put them down, but I don't need my NPC monsters to have vision.
Yeah, right. And it tracks every single one's vision code.
And it just slows everything down.
It's a great point.
Dave, final thoughts on on lighting and Darkvision.
I'm a fan of the Darkvision, having come from Infravision, so it's a little bit of a different animal. And
I'm gonna say, coming from a legacy of elves and my elvish blood, I'm a fan of having
Exactly. But using it in Roll20 I think it's really add a lot of atmosphere to the game, but it does get laggy, and so it's good tips for using the Fog of War for bigger maps and turning off the vision for non-player characters because they don't need to see anything to speed the game up. But I think it does add an interesting element to the game. It does slow things down in some areas. But that's not necessarily a bad thing. So I'm a fan. I'm a fan of.
All right, Brian. Final thoughts on Darkvision and lighting.
Similar to Dave, I was born into D&D from 2nd edition, so I like Darkvision in 5e. I would say as a DM though, if you're using a virtual tabletop like Roll20, make sure you understand how it functions. Set kind of the ground rules with yourself and your players of what you expect, and let them know in general if the adventure is going to require it, if it'll affect their fun, and just make sure everybody's having fun. That's really the ultimate point. I mean, if you want to change Darkvision so people are having fun, change Darkvision so people are having fun.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, that should be the rule of one for all those things. I really like that you made a specific point to go over what the expectations are for the campaign in terms of the vision levels, because that could affect what characters your players want to play as, and even letting them know if you're going to enforce something or not going to enforce something, and maybe you've got even new players to D&D and maybe they don't even realize. And like I was didn't quite realize how important Darkvision could be and what that actually meant, in terms of the fact that a lot of players have to light torches, and that can be a factor. So that could be something to explain. And as Brian mentioned, even choosing to enforce the disadvantage in dim light or not, or like me and just completely freaking forget about it. But it's a weird thing that a lot of races have, and it seems almost game breaking. on one hand. On the other hand, it seems like just a normal thing that apparently most people in this universe can just do, other than humans. So they have a huge disadvantage there. But and then all the good tips on lighting with Roll20 and Virtual Tabletop, also very critical in knowing how to set that up, how to properly put everything together. Someday I will actually get around to making some Roll20 videos and going over how to do some of that stuff. All right, I think that will do it for this month's DM Roundtable. Thank you so much to Brian, Dave, Corey, and Tiny for joining me for the Roundtable. I am Eric, and I hope to see you all again for next month's DM Roundtable discussion. Have a wonderful holiday and a happy new year.
Thank you.
Thank you
Bye,
much.
guys.
Thank you.
Bye,
Thanks,
everybody.
guys.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.